Did you know that St. John Bosco did apostolate with young men in prison? In this story, he manages to take 300 of them out for a hike. You're watching The Miracles and Prophecies of St. John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Prisons continued to be one of the fields where Don Bosco exercised his priestly ministry. But among these places of punishment, there was one for which he had special affection, La Generala in Turin. La Generala was, and still is, a correctional facility for juvenile offenders, either handed over by their relatives for correction or even condemned by the police councils or the courts for some more or less serious crime. Many inmates came from parents who cared little or nothing for their children's upbringing. Some had parents who were already incarcerated, and a few were orphans who had gotten into trouble with the police. Young men over 20 were drafted into the army, and those who had not yet completed their sentences were moved to adult prisons. At night, the inmates are locked up in separate cells, and during the day, they work in the fields or at some trade, always supervised by the guards. At a time when religion had a place of honor, discipline was easier, customs improved, and the young men gradually found themselves as if regenerated to new life. But when there was little or no influence by religion, riots, quarrels, brawls, injuries, attacks against morals, and other terrible actions had to be punished. Therefore, as long as the authorities allowed Don Bosco to visit those poor young men, and his occupations allowed, he would go. With the permission of the director of prisons, he instructed them in catechism, gave them sermons, and heard their confessions. Seeing themselves treated with such goodness, the young prisoners regarded Don Bosco as a father, and they gave him the sincerest proofs of esteem and affection. They endeavored to lead a new life beyond reproach. Shortly after Easter in 1855, Don Bosco gave those young men the spiritual exercises. His gentleness and charity had won over even the unruliest. He had succeeded in getting them all, but one, to approach the holy sacraments. The holy priest, moved by their change of heart, resolved to obtain some relief for them. The first thought that came to him was of a good hike, so he went to the city's director of prisons and said, "I come to make a proposal. Is there any likelihood it will be accepted?" "We will do all we can to please you, for your influence on our prisoners has been of great help to us," replied the officer. "Then I beg a pardon for those poor young men whose exemplary conduct for a long time has given no cause for complaint. Allow me to take them all out for a day. I will take them on a hike to Stupinigi. I would leave early and return at night. This walk will do good for their body and soul." But then the stunned director jumped out of his chair and said, "But you're not serious, Father." "I speak with the greatest seriousness in the world, and I beg you to consider my request." "Do you not know that I'm responsible for every escape?" cried the officer. "Rest assured," replied Don Bosco, "that there will be no escapes if you entrust these young people to me. I take full responsibility to bring each of them back to you." The director of prisons finally agreed. He conveyed the request to Urbano Rattazzi, the Minister of the Interior. He was a man who lacked moral qualities. Nevertheless, he had much ingenuity. He reflected momentarily on the proposal which the Director of Prisons presented to him on behalf of Don Bosco. It wasn't long before St. John Bosco himself visited the minister with that simple and open air which was natural to him, and which he always retained even in the presence of the highest personages. The minister received him with civil kindness. "I want to consent to the proposal," he said. "You can implement your plan, which will do much moral and physical good to these young prisoners. I will provide for disguised armed soldiers that will follow you from a distance to help in case some unruly soul should refuse to return to prison in the evening." "But, Your Excellency," Don Bosco replied, "I am most grateful for your courtesy, but I will only put my plan into effect on one condition. That is, that you allow me to be all alone with the young men, that you give me your word of honor not to send along armed guards. I take full responsibility, and Your Excellency shall put me in prison if any disorder occurs." The minister was astonished. "But," he exclaimed, "you will not bring back even one of those prisoners in the evening." "Trust me," replied Don Bosco. His demeanor clearly showed that he would not relent. So it was either take it or leave it, and Rattazzi was curious to see the results. Besides, Don Bosco inspired him with confidence. Therefore, he allowed Don Bosco to do what he wanted. The saint did not delay in returning to La Generala to arrange for the 300 prisoners to enjoy the favor granted them. On the evening before that memorable day, he gathered them all together and spoke thusly. "Boys," he said, "I have good news. As a reward for the good conduct, and as a reward for your correspondence in the course of the spiritual exercises, I have gone to the director of prisons and the minister of the interior and have obtained permission to take you for a hike tomorrow as far as Stupinigi." Hearing these words, the boys raised an enormous cry of wonder and joy. Don Bosco continued, "You see how great this favor is. It has never been granted before. Long live the minister! Long live Don Bosco!" exclaimed the boys, full of enthusiasm. "Yes, long live the minister," continued Don Bosco. "But now listen. I have given my word that you will behave yourselves, and that tomorrow evening you would all return here. Can I be sure that none of you will try to escape?" "Yes, yes, we'll be good," was the unanimous cry. Indeed, one of the older ones said, "If anyone even tries to escape, I'll run after him and snap his neck like a chicken." Another 18-year-old husky fellow added, "I will smash the head of anyone who displeases you with a stone, and he certainly will not come home alive." Don Bosco replied, "Enough, this talk is not good. I trust you all. I know you love me and will not displease me. Note that the city of Turin will have its eyes on us tomorrow. If anyone misbehaves, we'll all be in trouble. I would be in more trouble than anyone else because I asked for and obtained this favor for you. You'll be caught after a few hours. At most, after a day or two, you'll be arrested again and put in a harsher prison. On the other hand, if you all conduct yourselves well and return without causing any problems in the evening, perhaps you may enjoy similar outings from time to time. But all these are earthly considerations. There is one that is more important. You have recently promised God to be good and never offend Him again. He's watching you from heaven, ready to bless you now and in the future if you're faithful to Him. Give proof tomorrow of the sincerity and firmness of your resolutions. No disobedience, quarrels, or fights. Do you promise?" "Yes, yes, we promise." And then one of them added, "You will be our commander-in-chief, and on behalf of all of us, I assure you that never did any commander have more disciplined soldiers." The next day, they all exited their prison together. They gratefully enjoyed a day of sunshine and freedom, preceded by a donkey laden with provisions. Their affection for Don Bosco was touching. When they saw him a little weary from the journey, in the twinkling of an eye, they took the provisions off the shoulders of the donkey, carried them themselves, and then compelled Don Bosco to ride on the donkey. At Stupinigi, Don Bosco led them to church, celebrated Holy Mass, treated them cheerfully at lunch and snack time, and occupied them in various amusements throughout the day. To depict the contentment that flourished on all those faces is impossible to describe. They enjoyed a world of delights in the avenues of the royal castle, in the shade of the trees, on the banks of the waters, and in those meadows blanketed with succulent grass and covered with flowers. Their conduct was impeccable. No strife disturbed the peace of that day, and Don Bosco needed neither warnings nor reprimands to maintain discipline. In the evening, they all returned to prison more resigned to their fate and more docile than before. The minister waited impatiently for the expedition's outcome, but Don Bosco, without wasting a moment upon return, went in person to the minister, who was astonished at the priest's account. He said, "Father, I'm grateful to you for what you've done for our young prisoners, but I would like to know why the state does not have the same influence over those young men that you do." Don Bosco replied, "Well, Your Excellency, our force is a moral force, unlike the state, which knows only how to command and punish with coercive force. We speak primarily to the heart of the youth, and our word is the Word of God. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'd like to enroll in our Saturday Mass intentions for the promoters of St. John Bosco, please follow the link I've put on the screen. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Let's go.